When Pablo Casals reached 95, a young reporter threw him a question. Mr. Casals, you are 95 and the greatest cellist that has ever lived. Why do you still practice 6 hours a day at 95 years old? And Mr. Casals answered, because I think I'm making progress. Your goal is to make progress every day in your life. We call it growth. John Newman said growth is the only evidence of life. That is true naturally and especially spiritually. The Thessalonian Christians are new Christians, and more importantly, Paul tells us they're growing Christians. Welcome to the 260 journey as we start the book of 2 Thessalonians. The Thessalonian church was under heavy persecution, and while it was going through it, they were growing through it. This is important. They were not just going through it, but growing through it. What a lesson for us, that when you are faced with difficult times in your life, you just don't have to go through it, but you can go through those difficult times. Growth is not arrival, it's movement. Growth is not perfection, it's just getting better. The writer of Amazing Grace, John Newton, said it best. I'm not what I might be. I'm not what I ought to be. I'm not what I wish to be. I'm not even what I hope to be, but thank God I'm not what I once was. And I can say with the great apostle, by the grace of God, I am what I am. Listen to these words of commendation to the young Christians by the Apostle Paul, who are not what they used to be, but they're growing. This is in verse 3 and 4. You need to know, friends, that thanking God over and over for you is not only a pleasure, it's a must. We have to do it. Your faith is growing phenomenally. Your love for each other is developing wonderfully. Why? It's only right that we give thanks. We're so proud of you. You're so steady and determined in your faith, despite all the hard times that have come down upon you. We tell everyone we meet in the churches all about you. These new believers were growing through hard times. In fact, they were growing in two areas. Their faith was growing phenomenally, and their love for others was developing wonderfully. All happening in difficulty. Wow, you go, Thessalonians. Faith and love are the two things that Paul mentions that are growing in these believers' life. In fact, one Bible version says your faith is greatly enlarged. What the Apostle Paul did when he said the words greatly enlarged was to add a prefix to it, which basically meant your faith is getting supersized. You know that word, supersized, because we know McDonald's. Supersized to us means bigger fries, bigger Coke, but it does cost us to supersize. Paul was saying you paid the extra cost for the supersize of faith, and it's evident. What was the cost? Well, that's the next verse. Your perseverance and faith in the midst of persecutions and afflictions you endured. Notice it says persecutions and afflictions. Those two words are important. One is about the outside battles. The other is about the mental battles. Paul was saying you're getting hit outside and inside and holding your own because you're holding on to God. I love this. There is a sign in a family-owned coat store in Nottingham, England that hangs for all people to see. Let me read this to you. This is what it says. We've been established for over 100 years and have been pleasing and displeasing customers ever since. We have made money and lost money, suffered the effects of coal nationalization, coat rationing, government control, and bad payers. We have been cussed and discussed, messed about, lied to, held up, robbed, and swindled. And the only reason we stay in business is we can't wait to see what's going to happen tomorrow. It seems that the Thessalonians should put that sign on their church. Tomorrow for the Thessalonians is phenomenal faith and developing love. When Paul says your perseverance in these inside and outside battles makes you say, I can't wait to see what happens tomorrow. See, tomorrow for many is fearful, but not for these new Thessalonian Christians. They are not just going through stuff, but they are growing through things. A daughter complained to her father one day about how hard things were. As soon as I solve one problem, she said, another one comes up and I'm tired of struggling. Her father, a chef, took her to her kitchen where he filled 3 pots with water and placed each on a high fire. Soon the pots came to a boil, and in one he put carrots, the second he put eggs, and the last one he put ground coffee beans. He let them sit and boil without saying a word. The daughter impatiently waited, wondering what he was doing. After a while, he went over and turned off the burners. He fished out the carrots and placed them in a bowl. He pulled the eggs out and placed them in a bowl, and he poured the coffee into a bowl. Turning to her, he asked, Darling, what do you see? Carrots, eggs, and coffee, she replied. He brought her closer and said to her, Feel the carrots. She didn't notice that they were soft. He then asked her to take an egg and break it. After pulling out the shell, she observed the hard-boiled egg. Finally, he asked her to take a sip of the coffee. She smiled as she tasted the rich flavor. She asked, What does it mean, Dad? He explained that each of them had faced the same adversity, boiling water, but each reacted differently. The carrot went in strong and hard and unrelenting, but after being subject to the boiled water, it came out soft and became weak. The 8 was fragile. Its thin outer shell protected its liquid interior, but after sitting and going through the boiling water, its inside hardened. But the ground coffee beans were unique. By being in the boiling water, they changed the water. He asked his daughter, when adversity knocks at your door, which one are you? Thanks for joining the 260 Journey.